the silent departure. The conference chamber floated in the void between stars, a marvel of engineering that symbolized unity among the great civilizations. Crystal walls reflected the light of distant galaxies. Gravity generators hummed softly beneath polished floors. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, arranged by age of membership and perceived importance. At the very edge, in the smallest section, sat the human delegation. Commander Sarachin stood at the central podium. She was a woman of 53 years, with silver threading through her black hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of countless sleepless nights. She had served as Earth's primary representative for 12 years. Before that, she had been a colony administrator, a ship captain, and a medic. She had done everything the galaxy asked of humanity, and more. Today, she would ask for something in return. Members of the Council, Sarah began, her voice steady and clear. Humanity requests emergency relief for the Epsilon colonies. The Crystal Plague has infected 17 settlements. Without the specialized medical equipment and supplies we need, 40,000 people will die within the month. The request was simple. The need was urgent. The supplies existed in council warehouses, purchased with funds that humanity had contributed. Sarah waited for the response she had learned to expect, but still hope might change. High Chancellor Vorth of the Kelson Imperium leaned forward in his crystalline seat. His species lived for 3,000 years, and Vorth himself had seen 8 centuries pass. To him, human lifespans were like mayfly existences, brief flickers barely worth noticing. His voice carried the weight of assumed authority. Commander Chun, your people face a crisis every season. This council cannot function as a constant emergency response service for a species that insists on settling dangerous worlds. Sarah kept her expression neutral. With respect, Chancellor, humans settle the dangerous worlds because no other species will. The Epsilon colonies produce 70% of the rare minerals used in council ship construction. We mine those resources at great personal risk. A rippling sound came from the Aquari section. It might have been laughter. Diplomat Sathera spoke, her voice bubbling through translation devices. Perhaps if humans were more careful, fewer would need saving. Sarah had heard variations of this response for 12 years. Every human representative before her had heard it for the 200 years since humanity joined the council. Humans were reckless. Humans were short-sighted. Humans were convenient scapegoats for every problem and convenient labor for every impossible task. She tried once more. The medical supplies would cost the council nothing. They are already paid for. We simply need authorization to access them. Vorth's expression showed something that might have been amusement. The authorization process takes time, Commander. Perhaps in 3 months, we can review your request. In 3 months, 40,000 people will be dead. Then perhaps your people should not have placed themselves in such danger. The chamber fell silent. Sarah looked around at the assembled representatives. Some avoided her gaze. Others watched with curiosity, wondering if the human would finally show the emotion her species was known for. A few looked uncomfortable, though not uncomfortable enough to speak. Sarah thought about the families on Epsilon 7. She thought about Dr. Marcus Webb, who had sent her daily messages describing progression of the plague, his voice growing more desperate with each transmission. She thought about the children in the quarantine wards, confused about why they hurt, asking when the medicine would arrive. She thought about humanity's 2 centuries in the council, 200 years of taking the assignments no one else wanted, maintaining the deep space relay stations and radiation zones that would kill most species within hours, running rescue operations in unstable star systems, building the infrastructure that connected the galaxy while receiving none of the credit. She thought about the human engineers who had designed 60% of the Council's technology, their names erased from records and replaced with more acceptable species. She thought about her own daughter, who had died 15 years ago in a mining accident on a Council facility where safety equipment had been promised but never delivered. The official report had blamed human carelessness. Sarah reached into her pocket and felt the small device there. It was a transmitter, keyed to a single encrypted frequency. For 10 years, humanity had prepared for this moment, hoping it would never come but knowing it inevitably would. Plans had been drawn up in secret meetings. Resources had been quietly repositioned. Exit strategies had been rehearsed until every human in council space knew their role. The moment had arrived. Sarah pressed a button. Across the galaxy, 1 billion human communicators received the same simple message. Protocol Exodus. Begin. Sarah looked at Vorith one final time. She did not yell. She did not curse. She did not make a speech about justice or fairness or the value of human lives. There was nothing left to say that had not been said 1,000 times before. Instead, she simply spoke 3 quiet words. We are done. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her delegation followed. Behind them, confused murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vorith called out, Commander Chen, this session is not concluded. You cannot simply leave. Sarah kept walking. The door sealed behind her. In orbit around Earth, Admiral James Kowalski watched the stars from a bridge of the carrier vessel Indomitable. He was a broad-shouldered man with gray stubble and hands scarred from decades of military service. He had fought in every major conflict the Council had faced in the past 30 years. He had saved colonies, destroyed pirate fleets, and held defensive lines when no one else would. He had never asked for medals or recognition. He had simply done the work because people needed protecting. The message came through on his personal display. Protocol Exodus. Begin. James took a deep breath and turned to his bridge crew. All hands, this is the Admiral. Execute evacuation protocols. We're going home. His communications officer looked confused. Sir, we're scheduled to patrol the outer rim for another 6 months. Not anymore. Send recall orders to all human vessels. Military, civilian, commercial, everyone, tell them to cease current operations and return to human space immediately. Admiral, what about our obligations? James thought about obligations. He thought about the 73 human ships lost in the past decade while protecting Council trade routes. He thought about the memorials he had attended, the families he had comforted, the promises he had made that humanity's sacrifice mattered. He thought about how the Council had responded to each loss with bureaucratic sympathy and nothing more. Our obligations, James said quietly, are fulfilled. We've given enough. On the mining colony of Talos 9, Director Chinwei received a message during her morning inspection of the deep core extractors. She was a small woman with hands permanently stained by mineral dust and eyes that had learned to see in near darkness. She had run this operation for 20 years, pushing production higher every quarter, meeting impossible quotas while keeping her workers safe through sheer determination and innovation. The colony produced a rare element crystallium, essential for faster-than-light drive construction. 90% of the galaxy's supply came from this single human-operated facility. The work was dangerous. The environment was toxic. No other species had the physical tolerance or the organizational skill to extract crystallium efficiently. Chinwei read the message 3 times to be sure she understood. Then she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was a smile of someone who had carried an enormous weight for so long that she had forgotten what freedom felt like. She activated the facility-wide communication system. All personnel, cease operations immediately. Begin shutdown procedures. We're evacuating within 48 hours. Her second-in-command, a young man named David Torres, looked shocked. Director, we have contracts. Delivery schedules. The Council is expecting. The Council, Chinwei interrupted, can expect whatever they want. We're leaving. Activate the demolition protocols. Every piece of human technology gets destroyed. Every piece of data gets erased. They want to take what we've built. They can figure out how to rebuild it themselves. Similar scenes played out on 200 human colonies. Evacuation ships appeared from deeper human space, vessels that had been secretly constructed over decades. Families packed essential belongings. Engineers systematically dismantled or destroyed everything that could not be transported. Within 72 hours, humanity began the largest coordinated exodus in galactic history, and they did it in near silence. There were no angry broadcasts, no threats, no ultimatums. Humans simply stopped showing up for work. They stopped answering communications. They gathered their people and left, system by system, colony by colony, Installation by installation. On the medical station Sanctuary 3, Dr. Amaro Okonkwo oversaw the evacuation of the largest humanitarian facility in Council space. The station treated patients from every species, handling injuries and diseases that other facilities refused. 70% of the medical staff were human. 80% of the breakthrough treatments developed here came from human research. Amaro walked through the wards one final time, looking at the empty beds, the dark monitoring equipment, the silent treatment rooms. Automated systems would keep basic functions running for a few weeks. After that, without human maintenance, everything would gradually fail. She felt a moment of guilt. Then she remembered the council meeting 3 years ago where she had begged for funding to expand the pediatric wing. She remembered Vought dismissing her request because human medical practices are adequate but not exceptional. She remembered the children who had died waiting for treatments that exceptional medicine might have saved. The guilt faded. At the central hub, the massive space station that served as the galaxy's primary trading nexus, Chief Engineer Marcus Rivera prepared to leave his post. He had maintained the station for 18 years. He knew every system, every backup protocol, every quirk of the aging infrastructure. The station handled 60% of all interstellar commerce. It was also held together by human innovation and constant human maintenance. Marcus accessed the main computer and began uploading his final report. It was comprehensive. It detailed every system that required regular maintenance, every potential failure point, every workaround he had developed. He listed the specific expertise needed for each task. He included contact information for human engineering firms that might be willing to consult for appropriate compensation and respect. He knew the report would be ignored. The council would assume they could simply assign other species to maintain what humans had built. They would learn otherwise. As Marcus boarded the last human shuttle, he looked back at the central hub. Its lights glowed against the darkness of space, a symbol of galactic unity and cooperation. He wondered how long those lights would keep glowing without human engineers to maintain them. He suspected he would find out soon enough. Back on Earth, in a quiet office overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Director General Elena Martinez sat with the Human Leadership Council. On screens around the room, reports flowed in from every evacuated location. The exodus was proceeding smoothly. Casualties were minimal. Resistance from local authorities had been negligible, mostly because no one believed humans would actually leave. The last transport leaves Council space in 48 hours, reported Admiral Kowalski. Total evacuees, 1.4 billion humans, plus 800 million non-humans who chose to come with us. Elena raised an eyebrow. 800 million non-humans? Spouses, children, friends, people who saw what was happening and decided they'd rather take their chances with humanity. Elena nodded slowly. And the defensive perimeter? Activated. The barrier systems are online. Nothing gets through without our permission. The barrier had been humanity's greatest secret. For 50 years, human scientists had worked on technology that could seal off entire star systems. It was based on principles that other species had declared impossible. Of course, humans specialize in making the impossible work. Now that barrier surrounded all of human space. Nothing came in. Nothing went out. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity was alone. Elena looked at the faces on the screens, seeing relief mixed with sadness. Relief that the burden was lifted. Sadness for what could have been. Send one final message to the council, she said. Thank them for the opportunity to serve. Wish them well in their future endeavors. And inform them that humanity is withdrawing from all treaties, agreements, and obligations effective immediately. Should we explain why? Someone asked. Elena shook her head. They know why. They've always known. They just never cared enough to change. The message was sent. It was polite, formal, and final. And then, without another word, humanity closed the door on a galaxy that had taken everything they offered and given nothing in return. The great civilizations barely noticed at first. A few minor inconveniences. Some delayed shipments. Empty chairs at council sessions. But humans had always been background noise, easy to overlook and easy to forget. Soon, they would remember. Soon, They would understand exactly what they had lost. Soon, they would learn the difference between presence and absence, between taking and partnership, between dismissal and respect. But that knowledge would come too late. The humans were gone, and they had taken their miracles with them. The price of pride, the first week after humanity's departure, felt like a strange holiday on most council worlds. There was a sense of lightness, as if a minor annoyance had been removed. High Chancellor Vorth called an emergency session not to address the human exodus, but to discuss how to redistribute the abandoned territories and resources. "We must move quickly," Vorth announced to the assembled representatives. Human colonies contain valuable infrastructure and strategic positions. These assets should be allocated to species who will use them properly. The Kelson Imperium claimed the mineral-rich Epsilon colonies. The Aquari Collective took control of the deep space relay stations. The Torvan Republic absorbed the agricultural worlds. Everyone took something. No one questioned whether they could actually operate what they were taking. On Talos 9, a Kelson mining team arrived to restart crystallium production. Director Yalin, a veteran administrator with 4 centuries of experience, surveyed the facility with confidence. He had managed mining operations on 17 worlds. How difficult could one human facility be? "Activate the primary extractor," Yalin commanded. His crew worked the controls. Nothing happened. They tried backup systems. Still nothing. They spent 3 days attempting to initialize equipment that refused to respond. Finally, a junior technician discovered that every system was locked behind encryption that required human biometric identification. "Can we break the encryption?" Yalin asked. "Given enough time, perhaps. But, sir, even if we access the systems, we don't understand the extraction process. The humans were using methods we've never seen. The equipment is designed in ways that don't match any standard engineering principles." Yalin stared at the dark, silent machinery. The Council needed crystallium. 70% of the fleet's ships required it for drive maintenance. Without new supplies, ships would start breaking down within months. "Keep working on it," Yalin said, though doubt had crept into his voice. Similar problems emerged across every former human operation. The deep space relay stations at the Aquari had claimed began experiencing cascading failures. The relays were built to withstand the intense radiation of deep space, but they required constant recalibration and maintenance. The human engineers had performed these adjustments daily, making tiny corrections that kept the entire network functioning. Without those adjustments, the relays began drifting out of alignment. Communication delays increased from seconds to minutes, then to hours. Within 3 weeks, 40% of the galaxy's long-range communication network had gone dark. Diplomat Sathera sent an urgent message to the central hub, requesting human technical documentation. The message took 4 days to arrive instead of 4 seconds. The response, when it came from an automated human archive, was brief. "All technical documentation is proprietary. Licensing agreements available for negotiating parties who demonstrate good faith and mutual respect." Sathera read the message 3 times, her water-filled chamber rippling with agitation. The humans wanted to negotiate, after they had abandoned their posts, after they had betrayed the Council. The audacity was stunning. It was also irrelevant, because the Council could not negotiate with people who refused to communicate. At the central hub, the problems were more immediate and more catastrophic. The station's population had swelled to 4 million, as refugees from the communication breakdown sought shelter. But the hub itself was dying. Chief Administrator Kelvin, who had replaced Marcus Rivera, stood in the main engineering bay surrounded by failing systems. He was a Torvan, a species known for their technical aptitude and methodical thinking. He had reviewed all the maintenance logs. He had studied the schematics. None of it helped. The power distribution network is operating at 60% efficiency, his lead engineer reported. Life support is fluctuating. Gravity generators are showing signs of instability. Water recycling is contaminated, and the structural integrity fields are weakening. Rivera left comprehensive documentation. Kelvin protested. "We should be able to follow his procedures." "Sir, Rivera's documentation assumes we understand the underlying principles. But the humans built the station using hybrid technologies we don't fully comprehend. They combined Kelson energy systems with Aquari fluid dynamics and Torvin structural engineering, then added innovations of their own. Every system depends on every other system in ways we're still trying to map. Kelvin felt the first touch of real fear. The central hub was more than a trading station. It was a symbol. If it failed, confidence in the council would collapse. How long could we keep it running? The engineer hesitated. Weeks. Maybe a month if we're lucky. Across the galaxy, the cascade accelerated. On the medical station Sanctuary 3, patients began arriving faster than the automated systems could process them. A disease called void plague, which humans had quietly managed for 50 years, suddenly exploded across 12 systems. The plague was not new. It had always existed in the dark spaces between stars, a bacterial infection that thrived in low gravity. Human medical teams had developed treatments, vaccines, and containment protocols. They had administered these so routinely that other species never realized how close to disaster they constantly lived. Now those protocols were gone. The vaccines were locked behind encrypted databases. The treatment facilities were shuttered, and the plague spread unchecked. Ambassador Kyrex of the Thalmon sovereignty watched his daughter die in a hospital that had run out of medicine. She was only 60 years old, barely an adult by Thalmon standards. She had her whole life ahead of her. The doctor said the treatment existed, but they could not access it. Human-made formulas. Human-locked databases. Kyrex sat beside her bed and held her hand as her breathing became shallow. He remembered dismissing Commander Chen's request for medical supplies. He remembered thinking that human problems were not his concern. He had never considered that human solutions might be everyone's survival. His daughter died 3 hours before dawn. Kyrex did not leave her side. He sat in the silence and felt the weight of a choice he had made without understanding its consequences. While the Council world struggled with infrastructure collapse and medical emergencies, a greater threat was approaching. The Crimson Collective had been watching from the dark edges of explored space for decades, waiting for weakness. They were not a unified government, but a loose alliance of raider clans, pirate fleets, and exile warlords. Individually, they were manageable. United, they were dangerous. They had never attacked Council space because the defenses were too strong. The human military, though small compared to species like the Kelson, had a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Human tactical doctrine had become the standard for Council defense forces. Human officers trained entire generations of alien commanders. Now the humans were gone, and the Crimson Collective sensed opportunity. War leader Krent commanded the largest collective fleet, a massive armada of scavenged ships and hardened crews. He had spent 40 years fighting in the frontier zones, always careful to avoid direct confrontation with Council forces. Now he led his fleet toward the inner systems with predatory confidence. The Council's defensive perimeter should have detected the invasion force days before arrival. The early warning network, built and maintained by humans, would have provided detailed information about fleet composition, trajectory, and estimated arrival time. Instead, the network was silent. Half the sensors were offline. The other half transmitted garbled data that no one knew how to interpret. Krenta's fleet struck 3 border worlds before the Council even knew an invasion had begun. Captain Thorne of the Kelson Defense Fleet received emergency orders to intercept the collective. He was a decorated officer with 2 centuries of combat experience. He commanded a battle group of 30 ships, each equipped with the finest weapons the Council could provide. What he did not have was human tactical support. For 100 years, human advisors have been embedded in every major fleet, providing real-time strategic analysis and tactical coordination. Their ability to process complex battle data and adapt quickly to changing conditions had become essential to Council military operations. Thorne had never questioned this arrangement. He had simply gotten used to having humans on his bridge, quietly offering suggestions that usually proved correct. Now his bridge felt empty. His tactical displays showed the approaching collective fleet, but without human analysis, he struggled to predict their movements or identify their weaknesses. He formed his battle group into a standard defensive formation and waited. The collective tore through his fleet in 4 hours. Thorn's ships were individually superior, but Kremta's forces moved with coordinated precision that overwhelmed the Council's rigid tactics. 23 Council ships were destroyed. The survivors retreated in chaos. Thorn sat in his damaged command center, staring at casualty reports. 8,000 dead. His entire career, he had relied on human expertise. He had never learned to function without it. None of them had. The invasion continued. System after system fell. The collective was not interested in occupation. They wanted plunder, and the Council worlds were suddenly rich with undefended targets. On Athon Prime, Vorth convened an emergency war council. The chamber that had once held representatives from 47 species now held barely 20. Some had fled to their home worlds. Others had died in the fighting. Those who remained looked exhausted and frightened. "We must contact humanity," said Councillor Veth, a Torvan representative who had always maintained cordial relations with human diplomats. "We need their military expertise. We need their tactical support." Vorth's crystalline features hardened. "Absolutely not. We will not beg those short-lived deserters to save us. The humans abandoned the Council in its time of need. We will resolve this crisis ourselves." "With what?" Veth demanded. "Our fleets are in retreat. Our infrastructure is collapsing. Our people are dying from diseases we don't know how to treat. The humans did not abandon us, Chancellor. We drove them away through 2 centuries of contempt." The chamber erupted in argument. Accusations flew. Blame was assigned. But no solutions emerged because the only solution was the one Vorth refused to consider. In a forgotten archive on the Thalmon homeworld, Scholar Vena made a discovery that would change everything. She had been researching the history of Council technological development, trying to understand how their civilization had progressed so rapidly in the past 2 centuries. What she found disturbed her deeply. Patent records that had been altered, scientific papers with human authors whose names had been replaced, engineering breakthroughs attributed to species who had merely implemented human designs. The pattern was systematic and damning. Humans had been the primary innovators behind 60% of modern Council technology. They had solved problems that other species considered impossible. They had bridged gaps between different technological traditions, creating hybrid systems that worked better than anything before. And they had been erased from history. Their contributions had been stolen, rebranded, and credited to species considered more prestigious. Vena compiled her findings into a comprehensive report. She included documentation, cross-references, testimony from engineers who admitted the truth. The report was 3,000 pages long and irrefutable. She sent it directly to Vorth with a simple message: "This is what we lost." Vorth read the report in his private chambers. It took him 6 hours to get through even a fraction of the evidence. With each page, he felt his certainty crumbling. The humans had not been peripheral members of the Council. They had been the foundation upon which modern galactic civilization was built, and the Council had treated them like servants. Vorth sat in darkness, the weight of his species' 1,000-year lifespan suddenly feeling like a burden. He had lived 8 centuries. He had seen civilizations rise and fall. He had considered himself wise and experienced. Now he understood that longevity was not wisdom. Living a long time did not make you right. It just gave you more time to be wrong. His communicator chimed. It was a message from the Emergency Defense Committee. The Crimson Collective had broken through the inner defensive perimeter. They were 3 days from Athon Prime. The Council's capital world, the center of galactic civilization, was about to fall. Vorth stood and walked his window. He looked out at the city that had stood for 10,000 years, at the monuments to ancient victories and the spires that reached toward the stars. He thought about all the species who had contributed to this civilization. He thought about the ones who had been ignored. He activated his personal communication array and began composing a message. It was addressed to the Human Leadership Council on Earth. It was not an order or a demand. It was something Vorth had never written before. It was a plea. "To the human people," he began, "we have failed you. We have dismissed your contributions, stolen your innovations, and treated your sacrifices with contempt. We do not deserve your help. We have not earned your compassion. But I asked for it anyway, not for myself, but for the billions of innocent beings who will die if the council falls. He continued writing, his words becoming more honest with each line. He admitted everything: the theft, the disrespect, the systematic erasure of human contributions. He did not make excuses. He did not justify. He simply acknowledged the truth. "We were wrong," he finished. "If you choose not to help us, I will understand. That choice would be just. But if there is any mercy in your hearts, if you believe that people can learn from their mistakes, please consider that millions of innocents will suffer for our failures." Not everyone in the council treated humanity with contempt. Some spoke for you. Some tried to help. They should not die for my arrogance. He sent a message and waited. The communication traveled through the broken network, delayed by failing relays, rerouted through damaged systems. It took 16 hours to reach Earth instead of 16 seconds. On Earth, Director General Elena Martinez read Vortha's message aloud to the Human Leadership Council. The room was silent as she finished. No one spoke for a long time. Admiral Kowalski finally broke the silence. "He's right that some council members try to help. I remember Veth. Good person. Fair. There were others too. There were also millions who laughed while we buried our dead," said someone else. "Millions who benefited from our labor and gave nothing back. And millions who were children when those decisions were made," Elena said quietly. "Millions who are innocent. The question is not whether the council deserves our help. The question is what kind of people we want to be." The debate lasted for hours. Arguments were passionate. Emotions ran deep. But gradually a consensus emerged. Not because anyone had won the debate, but because the Human Council remembered something that the galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes you help people not because they deserve it, but because helping is the right thing to do. Elena composed a response. It was shorter than Vortha's message, but carried just as much weight. "The human fleet will arrive in 48 hours. We will help you survive this crisis. After that, we need to talk about building something better than what came before. Something based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. We are willing to try. The question is whether you are." She sent the message and immediately activated military protocols. The human fleet had been standing ready, just in case. Not because humanity wanted to swoop in and be heroes, but because abandoning people die had never been a human way, even when those people had treated them terribly. Admiral Kowalski prepared his ships. Engineers packed emergency supplies. Medical teams assembled field hospitals. Within 36 hours, the largest human fleet ever assembled was crossing the barrier into council space. They came not as conquerors or saviors, but as people who had learned that the hardest thing is not walking away from those who hurt you. The hardest thing is coming back to help them anyway. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had known all along. Respect cannot be demanded or stolen. It must be earned through action, maintained through integrity, and shared through genuine partnership. The Council had taken 200 years to learn this lesson. The question now was whether they would remember it. The human fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, racing toward a galaxy that had finally, painfully, begun to understand what it had lost. And in the darkness between stars, the real work of rebuilding was about to begin.